Hi, welcome to Dare to Be Authentic podcast. I'm your host, Mari Mitchell. I'm so glad to be here with you again today. I have a very special guest. Her name is Audrey Sulpizio, and at her deepest level, she is a healer and guide through the maze of life, especially concerning loss. She's also a REIKI practitioner. Audrey is able to pick up on clients' emotional needs extremely quickly and can adapt to address concrete resources as well as depending on the situation. She's expanding her services to not only deal with loss, but to take on the role of death doula, not only working with the terminally ill for a smooth transition, but helping the surviving family members as well. Welcome to the show, Audrey. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Murray?
I'm doing great as well. So let's talk a little bit about what inspired you to do what you're doing right now.
Well, and that's like a big question. um, I had a very not weird, really, but tough childhood.
Hmm.
And I also have had a lot of losses during my life as a child and as an adult. And so, you know, let me go back to say, I remember when I was about 3 or 4 years old. And I was hiding in the bottom of a closet and I took these vows, which I still do today. Um, I was vowing to help people.
Hmm.
I had at that point said that my goal would be, get this, an emergency room physician.
Oh, wow.
I know it's pretty funny now that I think of it, but that was me till I was about, oh, 21.
Mm.
It stayed like that. So I like critical situations. You know, I'm kind of an enigma and I like to help in different ways. But let me just say a couple of things from way back, if you will let me.
Sure.
Um, first of all, I escaped Hungary when it was under communist rule.
Wow.
And yeah, and I escaped not with my parents or anybody. It was just somebody who, that's what they did. They helped people to cross to Austria.
Okay.
So when we were being shot at and all those kinds of critical things. So that kind of made me even more hell bent, if you wish, on what I want to do.
Right.
Um, you know, it's there's just been a lot of different things that have happened. We had a house fire when I was 16,
Mm.
lost my grandmother there, and just you know, I just want to be there for people.
Right. That's awesome. Wow, that's quite a story, Audrey. And
That's only half of it.
but what I love the most of everything you've said is that how old were you when you were at in that closet?
3 or 4.
Wow, at that young age, you already knew that you were here to help people. You already knew
I,
your purpose. You knew your purpose.
that's that's it. That's what I'm here for.
That's so amazing. I just love that little 4-year-old. And I can feel that that desire is still strong in you today. It hasn't diminished. In fact, if anything, it's gotten bigger.
You're right. Absolutely. No, that's the way it came and that's the way it grew.
So tell us a little bit about your biggest passion right now.
Well, I think that now I feel like my biggest passion is helping people that have a terminal illness or that have maybe just lost something, meaning maybe they lost their entire job or career, or maybe, there's a lot of big losses that people have,
Yes.
not the least of which is losing a pet, for example.
Hmm.
I have somebody that I worked with yesterday that she had to have her little dog put down.
Oh.
And it's really hard, but I think my biggest passion is to work with people who are either terminally ill or maybe just past the point where they cannot be helped, put it that way.
Okay.
You know, and then working with the family, because you really have to reinvent yourself completely once that person's gone.
Yeah.
You know.
So how do you deal with all of this loss in other people's lives? I mean, you've had your own losses. Does
Yeah.
does it make you go back to feel your losses or not?
Yes and no. It makes me go back in my brain as to how I felt at the time
Hmm.
when I went through it. And I don't know if this is a good time to talk about my husband who passed away.
Yeah, if you'd like to, it's up to you. You can go with
Sure.
your intuition.
Okay. Um, I was, I had gotten married for the second time. I had a divorce before that. And my husband, within 5 years, wound up being diagnosed with dementia.
Oh,
And it changed him, obviously, but it changed me as well.
mm,
Because not only did I have to take care of him, but I had to be that rock, you know. Um, he was very frustrated. He couldn't talk the last 4 years of his life.
wow.
And yeah, I remember the frustration that somebody feels in trying to find a cure, and the anger, and you just want to help and you can't.
Right.
So when it came to, after 10 years, it came to the point where I knew he was not going to be around very long, because he had lost so much weight and all that. So what working with someone does is, for me, it's remembering all those feelings that I went through. And it helps me to understand
Mm,
what that person that is maybe going through it to some degree, but also maybe the person who's sitting next to them, a family member or their spouse. And I looked at all that as not so much as a loss, but more that was my entire raison d'etre during that 10 years.
mm,
That is what I was here for, to make his journey smoother and his transition, let's say, to the other side much smoother and without all the fear that we all fear. We have that in our society. We're afraid of fear. Like, I'm afraid of fear. Yeah, we're afraid of fear, but also we're afraid of death.
yes.
It's a horrendous thing for us.
Hmm.
For me, it is not. It is simply a transformation, the old adage that you can't kill energy. And
Right.
that's what we are.
Hmm.
So I don't have that fear, and I think I managed to get him not to have that fear.
That's
He
fantastic.
wasn't as afraid.
Right. That's fantastic, Audrey. Wow. What a story. So let's talk for authenticity about authenticity for a minute. Did you have something to add to that?
No, no, that's okay.
Since this is called Dare to Be Authentic, let's talk about the role authenticity plays in all this for you.
I believe that unless somebody allows themselves to fear, if they have a fear, to feel other emotions, to to be able to be courageous enough to face that raw emotion.
Hmm.
And that's, to me, that's authenticity. And if we do that, and if I have a client with whom, you know, we can meet at that level, then I think anything can happen. Miracles can happen.
Mm.
So, but if we don't, Murray, then I think really there's no connection and therefore there's no growth or anything else, you know?
Yeah. And what about in your own personal life? How has authenticity served you?
I I try to be extremely authentic and while being diplomatic with people, but at the same time, I try to be me. People say, "How are you doing today?"
Hmm.
And, you go to the doctor's office and he asks you, "How are you doing?" I says, "Well, since I'm here, I've been better."
Right.
I mean, and I'm sure everybody says, "I'm fine. How are you, doctor?"
Right.
So I try to be as real as I can without burdening people with everything going on in my life.
Right. I understand that. I love the
Yeah.
part about diplomatic because I know that you have the same that I do. I'm very intuitive and I can perceive things and know things about people, but there is a diplomacy. There is a not wanting to hurt someone's feeling or offend them in any way. So it's kind of like a balance there.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly the way to put it. Because you have to hit that balance almost every moment of every day.
Yeah,
You know?
especially in the kind of work that you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, really. It's true.
What is the biggest success you've had as you've helped people transition or with the family members after?
Um, Way back, I was working with a gentleman who had cerebral palsy, and he was very, very accepting of it. And I'd say that we learned a lot from each other because, he was probably towards the end of his, well, I know he was around the end of his life or pretty close to it.
Okay.
And I wasn't there when he passed,
Hmm.
but it was that knowledge that we both understood and accepted that this is what's going to happen here. And I I consider that a success because I felt like he kind of calmed down and he had a different outlook
Right.
on what happened. Yeah, like he had accepted it before that, but he was just, you know, he didn't really he wasn't as upset, let's say.
Right. Right.
And so with also some of his family members, um, they were extremely upset that he was this way,
Right.
because they couldn't, I think, envision themselves. What are we going to do now? If he goes, he passes, where does that leave them? That's their entire work was to take care of him.
Yeah.
So we had to work quite a bit after that to try to really figure out really what it is that what other goals did they have in their life and who are they now.
Mm.
So yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And let's talk a little bit more about the family members after the person passes.
Yes.
We talked about the head. So how do you go about this? Because not only have they lost their role, they've lost a loved one. They're in the middle of grieving, deep grieving. And so, how do you find that balance where they know they have to move on, yet they have to grieve?
It's not and all, it's not the same for everybody. It's very, very different.
Okay.
And I'm trying to find the words, but it's like it's not a one size fits all.
Okay.
And so basically, I think you have to get to the bottom of it to feel, for that person to feel that how how are they going to continue while not denying their grief. So all I can really do is guide them through that, let them feel it, because it's important to feel that,
Very.
and then go on from there. Hopefully I can help them find something in their past or in their present that'll give them a glimmer of hope and something to strive for, you know.
Mhm.
And there's something that does not exist out there, and I realize this. And I don't know how to put it even. It's more like a pre-death grieving. Like, let's say you have like what I had, 10 years of taking care of this person. And they're going to pass, but
Right.
there's already some grieving coming. You have to deal with the pre-death grieving. So that's a whole lot. And there's no support groups or anybody that deals with that particular aspect.
It's true because they talk about caregivers or helping caregivers, which is what you are at that point.
Yeah.
So maybe it's up to you to do something for pre-death grieving.
Yeah.
It's something
I
that's
do feel that.
going
I,
to come up with something because it's absolutely necessary. You see the necessity of it. And it's almost like it's a tricky situation. How do you grieve when the person is still here?
yes,
At the same time, there is a lot to grieve for. All the things that you can no longer do with that person, they can no longer
exactly.
do with your husband. They couldn't communicate. There's a lot of
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if you take it down to the level of your your pet that is very ill,
Hmm.
um, maybe you've been taking care of that poor little soul for, years
Right.
because he hasn't been well.
Hmm.
And then he's going to go. There's going to be that day when you have to take him down to the vet, or maybe he'll die on his own.
Right.
You have to kind of get ready for it,
Mm.
and not feel guilty when you're on your way to the vet. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
It's something we need.
Mm. Yeah. Pre-death grieving. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Okay. Awesome. So, what do you think is the main message that you want to bring to the public today?
It's something that I have really dealt with and just had to figure my way out from this. Um, I grew up with a mom that felt like there was only two ways to do something, either her way or the wrong way.
Mm.
And so, and I think a lot of people will, have gone through that.
Yeah.
It took me until probably, I don't even know how old I was. By the time I realized, there is a different way. So what I want to bring to people is that knowledge and that feeling that there is many, many different ways to look at things, and some of them are self-destructive and some of them are actually growth oriented. So I think I have a gift of helping people really to envision themselves once they are past the problem,
Mm.
whether that's a death or whatever it is. But you have to be able to envision yourself as to who you are now. What are you going to do now?
Yes.
So, so that's I think the message.
I don't like that. I love the many different ways because even society kind of tries to teach us that this is the way you do this.
Yes,
This is what
yes,
you do in school, then you go to high school, then you go to college, then you get a job. And they got it all planned out for you, right? And some of us,
yep,
"Nah, that's not really fitting me." And, they're trying to put a uh, square block into a round peg. But
yes,
it's so true that there are many different ways to do whatever. And so I love that. That's a beautiful thing for people to open to because what happens is in my life, you feel guilty,
oh
because
yeah,
you're not following whatever that was, right? And why do I feel this way? Well, it's the way we feel. We feel how we feel. So I think that's extremely valuable, Audrey. Thank you so much for
The-
bringing that up.
Sure, the guilt is a big deal, you know. Um, and let me get back to that pet issue.
Hmm.
When you're bringing that poor thing down to the vet to be put down, what kind of guilt do you feel afterwards? It's horrible. You feel like, oh my God, I killed somebody.
Hmm.
And you almost literally did, you know, but it was something that you did out of love and compassion,
Right.
you know. And I remember doing that with my pet, as a matter of fact, and I felt terrible. And then when that happened for me, I had to come home and I had to talk to my husband, who really didn't communicate very well, but who saw me walk away holding the leash and bringing his favorite soul in the whole world and not come back with him.
Mm.
How do you explain that to someone with dementia that doesn't really get it? And he looked at me like, I'll tell you, if looks could kill, I would not be here sitting talking to you.
Wow.
Yeah, but it had to be done, and it's out of love.
Yes. So what have you found for yourself helps to deal with that, or not even deal with? The guilt is really not real guilt. In other words, you have no reason to be guilty. It's just
No.
it's a feeling, and it's a very strong feeling. How does someone move on from that feeling of guilt?
Well, first of all, I think we all try to put it behind us.
Hmm.
And I think this is the perfect podcast, Dare to be authentic, because you have to allow yourself to feel that, first of all. Okay. And it doesn't take one day and it doesn't take one week. It takes a long time.
Right.
And, you know, very few people. I recently met a guy who said, well, I'm over it. Yeah. When did this happen? A couple of months ago. Okay. Maybe. All right. So, what I'm saying is, you have to work at seeing something that'll pull you through. You know, there has to be a glimmer of hope somewhere, and there has to be something that makes you get up in the morning,
Hmm.
you know, and that just has to be felt. You have to help that people to find that. Like that person probably doesn't even see that at that moment.
Right. Right. Of course.
So I think it's my job to, you know, just kind of go in there and fish around until I find something, you know?
Very good. And you are very intuitive, so you can really help people find that. And when we're in these situations where we're grieving or having other strong emotional feelings, we can't see the clarity. You know, those feelings can cloud us from our own intuition, because we all have that intuition. And that's where someone like you comes in and is very helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, the first thing that goes when you're in a crisis situation is creativity.
Mm,
So you don't have that, you know, that intuition and all that to lean on, because
right.
all of a sudden it's gone. You can't think straight,
Right.
like what you said. And that's very difficult on your own. I mean, I know what it was like
Yeah.
going through things by myself, you know, sitting at the bottom of that closet, trying to deal with everything that was going on around me, which was craziness.
Hmm.
And I don't want people to have to go through that alone,
Right.
you know, when I can help.
Absolutely. We're put here to help each other. And so, I mean, it's what we're put on this earth for. And that's this is your path, and it's a wonderful one. It's a hard one. I think it's a hard one,
It
but
is.
a wonderful one. Yeah. Yeah.
That's okay.
So, is there one last thing? We have around 7 minutes. Is there one last thing that you'd like to say to a listener, something that's really on your heart today?
Well, I could say that we haven't talked too much about healing
Yeah, let's talk about that.
as far as Reiki is concerned.
Hmm.
And I do believe in different various ways of healing, you know, energy healing, you name it. Um, I love to do that. And I have actually done that remotely, which my down to earth mind doesn't even understand that,
Right.
But, I remember one time my sister-in-law came home from work and she was the other end of the city. And she said, I feel horrible. I know you just had this Reiki workshop and whatever. And she goes, would you mind trying something? I feel like throwing up. I feel horrible.
Wow.
And I said, well, I've never done this before because this is remote and I've never done that. And she said, well, I don't mind. I said, okay, lay down and just close your eyes and don't even think of anything. It doesn't matter. I'm going to go through scanning your entire body. And interestingly, this went on for about a half hour. And I kept having to come back. What they tell you when they're teaching you Reiki is if there's something that you feel at any point in the body, I usually start at the head and go all the way down. If you feel anything, then go back to it because that means you need more attention on there. So I did this about 3 times with her. And at the end, I just had to call it. I just say, I can't keep doing this. There's something, I don't know. And I said, how do you feel? And she said, well, I feel actually I'm hungry. And I'm like, oh, that's a good sign. And so the point is that I was in a totally different sphere and not different plane, really. Because I said to her, I said, I just want to tell you, I kept coming back to your chest area. And I don't know what the issue was, but I couldn't get over that. And she said, duh, Audrey, I'm a breast cancer survivor. And I'm like, oh my God. And it wasn't even in my head to think about
Right.
that.
Right.
But I felt it. And that's the point. There are lots of just intuitive things that you feel when you're doing Reiki.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not really right here, right now. Like that's not exactly right.
That's pretty awesome. Wow.
It is. It is. And it helped her. I've done many other things on pets, on everybody.
That's fantastic. So you offer that in person and remotely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it was a good thing that your sister-in-law called and said, I need this. And you're like, I don't do remote. Yes, you do.
I've done that with another friend who had a dog
Mm-hmm.
that was just couldn't walk all day long. And I did all this without taking too much of your time. Um, I told her, do not intervene. Don't do anything. Go to the other end of the room and let me talk to the dog. And I know it's weird, but okay. And so I started to do the scanning of the body, the whole thing. Then all of a sudden, my friend says, you're done, aren't you? And I'm like, well, I had told her not to say anything. So
Right, right.
why do you think that? She said, well, the dog just walked right up to me. And that dog, I have not been able to even take her outside to pee.
Wow.
And she says she walked up to me and now she wants me to go into the kitchen. I guess that's for food, she says. I said, you're kidding. I couldn't believe it myself. But that's exactly what happens with Reiki. It's unbelievable.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. So, any one last little tip or encouraging word for the listener?
I'd like to say that you're never stuck.
Mm,
You may feel that way, but you know what? You're not really stuck. Again, there's all these different ways to look at it. And it's kind of like the spokes of a wheel. You can go this way or that way or that way.
right.
And every one of them will lead you to a different place. You just have to find the right spoke in the wheel.
That's beautiful. I love that, Audrey. Wow. So encouraging. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been lovely, lovely having you, finding out more about what you do. Thank you for listening in to Dare to Be Authentic podcast. And make sure you catch us next time. Bye for now.
Well, bye bye.